What's that two can carry? Rental truck, paint strip, tires close to failing. Driver says it's a moving job. It's clearly not. One-day contract to cross the state line, that's draws. No household goods inside. Drums stacked to the ceiling. Plastic torn, heavy powder exposed. Yellow cake, baby, yellow cake mule. Interstate haul, not cocaine, not meth, not street contraband. Powder for the core, driven in daylight, truck rolls west. Nothing stops it. Libya, 2011, concrete yard, barrels left in rows, 1,000 tons in storage, fence pulled down. Inspectors went in, counted drum by drum, 10 were missing, 5 were found outside, abandoned in the open, left without a guard, not contraband, wages measured in uranium, loaded at night. Routes not reported, hidden hand, fuel cycle sustains. AIA looks away, police say nothing. Wrong kind of crime, freight moves west. Looks like moving day. Yellow cake mule, interstate haul, not cocaine, not meth, not street contraband. Powder for the core, driven in daylight, truck rolls west. Nothing stops it. Truck keeps moving. Highway takes it in. No mercy, no break. Only yellow cake mule. Yellow cake mule. Yellow cake mule.
Welcome, everybody. Hope you're doing well. It was Yellow Cake Mule by James Lucid. I'll put a link in the description to the song itself. Make sure to look around. He's got hundreds and hundreds of anti-nuclear music like that. And he does the videos, the graphics, the songs, the lyrics. It's pretty extraordinary. Pretty extraordinary. I'm Dana. I hope you're doing well. We got a good show tonight. We're going to get right after it. You can call into these live shows at 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. And that song hits some important stuff because I don't really cover the transportation side of the nuclear industry. I have, but it's pretty rare. But to get the visuals is something we'll never see unless you go over to James's site and you get this kind of insight that you can't get anywhere else. Would you rather have birds and insects and bees and whales and animals and mammals and all the beautiful creatures and the species on this planet, or nuclear power and nuclear fallout? What would you rather have? I'm betting you're like a lot like me, unless you're with the nuclear industry. It's an easy vote, right? I'm going to do a news cycle, kind of. The first two stories are current stories, and then I kind of slipped away into legacy stories from the original accident, because you can't ignore those stories. Don't ask me what the hell that is. It just happened. Yeah, a bit of a glimpse into the Matrix that one, was it? John Laforge. Terrible, just a terrible individual. And what makes it even worse is he's a anti-nuclear activist. He's with Nukewatch. And he's actually the nuclear industry. He's got nothing to do with... he's the co-director of Nukewatch, a peace and environmental justice group in Wisconsin. And he edits its newsletter. That's really important for what I'm going to talk about. So this is a story by him, not edited by him, just like somebody else wrote it. He's the actual writer. I've sent him pictures of Fukushima. He rejected them, blatantly too. And so he knows the difference. There's no excuses, because we've had exchanges in the emails. I just gave up on him because he's not an anti-nuclear activist. Done that again, did it? My apologies. That's a bit better. Let's keep her after it. So let me step back for 1 second. John Laforge is not an anti-nuclear activist. He's not an environmentalist. He's a pro-nuclear disguised as an anti-nuclear. That's the lowest forms of life conceivable. Or he's pretending he's anti-nuclear, but he's 100% pro-nuclear. He's not naive. He's a pro-nuclear disguised as an anti-nuclear. He's the worst kind of human you can imagine. Fukushima workers fled a site after a tsunami scare. This was the Russian earthquake a few weeks back. Well, I guess it's a bit longer than that now. July the 3rd, right? One of the most earthquake-prone areas in the world, and regular quake raises traumatic memories of March 11th. How dare somebody who's pretending they're anti-nuclear but is a pro-nuclear even invoke that? How dare that person? He should be litigated in court for what he's doing. Unfortunately, it's not illegal to be a piece of shit scumbag like John Laforge. In late July, a mighty, because you can tell a fake anti-nuclear by the way they write their stories. They're trying to sound like they're an anti-nuclearist, like they're sympathetic. They're not. They don't have the same hopes and dreams as a normal human. In late July, a mighty 8.8 magnitude quake struck off the Macau Bay in Russia's Far East. We all remember that, right? Triggering a tsunami warning and evacuations across the entire Pacific Rim. The owner-operator of the wrecked... when you look at Fukushima in context of 14 years later, and the word you're going to use is wrecked. The building doesn't even exist. And I've sent him this picture. He rejected it. He says the fuel pools are still there. Evacuated its entire staff of 4,000. What is 4,000 people going to do at a nuclear meltdown? Somebody want to explain that to me? Somebody want to try to explain to me what kind of jobs they're going to be doing at a nuclear meltdown? 4,000. These are not staff, these are homeless people and destitute and victims of society and immigrants who don't speak the language, and there's zero possibility there's 4,000 there. It's zero possibility. There's nothing 4,000 people can do at a nuclear meltdown. What you do is you send in the victims of society, the homeless and destitute, and people who don't speak the language, don't know any better. Let me give you an example of what I'm trying to talk about. So, after Fukushima, they said they had over 7,000 people there. 6,000 of them were working on containing the water going into the Pacific. 6,000 people. Simply was an unbelievable lie. There was nobody trying to stop it because you can't do nothing with nuclear meltdowns. So here's another one of the things they'd done. They said they had 7,000 people there. They had 1,000 people working on something else. But 6,000 was working on the water. That was the official story. Now they say there's 4,000 there. These buildings will look like this, kind of like that in 1,000 years. They put these contraptions over it that don't physically touch it and then sold you this. But the building actually looks like that. Right, the buildings were gutted right to the ground almost, and you should have gutted it all the way to the ground. There's nothing left of the building. The idea was build these contraptions off-site, assemble it with remote control cranes, and sacrifice whatever homeless people you could. Like they murdered them. So they can hoodwink you. That's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the opposite of what a human would do. And we're dealing with an industry that has 80 years of never being held accountable, so it's completely out of control now. You got generations and generations of inbreeding, and so the current generation that works for the nuclear industry, is protected nuclear industry, are so disconnected from the human experience, right? They don't have the emotions. You know, if the child dies in front of them, they're not going to cry. They don't know how to cry. Right? It has to be something like someone stole their bank account, then they might cry, but it won't be because their child or wife or parents or best friend or it won't died. It'll be because of something directly affected the only thing that gives them joy, which is a lot of money. China partially lifts a ban on Japanese seafood imports. It didn't lift any ban. China said blatantly they weren't even talking about it. They weren't even considering. Japan came out with that narrative. But John Laforge, Nukewatch, is out there to sell you the same old song, propaganda machine just sold you for 14 years. It's really interesting. Except the 10 prefectures closest to the Fukushima Daiichi site. So what he's actually talking about, we'll get to it, but he tells so many lies, you can't keep up with it. After conducting water sample inspections off the coast of the site, these are 4 nuclear meltdowns with 8 reactor cores also melted down in each of the buildings, at the top of the buildings in 2 fuel pools. There's around 36 reactor cores. Beijing has banned all such imports from Japan. Now, they're talking about seafood since Japan announced that they were allegedly dumping water, but you got to appreciate the buildings blew up and were gone in 5 days. There was nothing left after 5 days. This didn't play out really slow. This 4 reactor buildings full of decades of reactor cores detonated in a row by day 5. They've lost all the inventories. Not some of the inventories, but all the inventories. In 4 buildings, maybe the common span fuel pool, maybe reactor 6. And we say that because of the pictures that were released unceremoniously in 2021 on the 10th year anniversary. Not on the anniversary itself, but the 10th year. And there were 736 mystery pictures released. China banned all the food just after Fukushima happened. So did 55 other countries. So when they cooked up this scam in 2023, August of 24, where they claimed they were releasing water for the first time, nothing has ever got out of the building. Well, clearly nothing got out of the buildings. Look at it. Can you imagine anything getting out of those buildings? I can't. John Laforge can't. Deliberately discharging. So John Laforge is trying to convince you nothing got out. That's what he's doing. And it's interesting where he says the start of deliberately. He has been hemorrhaging out of there for 14 years, and now they're deliberately releasing water. That's another way you can take it. He can write that and then justify that he's not really a monster when he looks into a mirror for just a few seconds, I guess. This is the Neptunium-239 dispersion. And this decays to plutonium in 2.5 days, covering the entire planet in 20 days. 50% of it turns to plutonium in the first 2.5 days, which is named after the devil because it's such a hideous isotope. Large volumes of radioactively contaminated cooling water into the Pacific. Like, you lost everything. You didn't put anything in the tanks. You lost everything. And then you're pouring water over the remains, so you're picking up fuel particles. You can't put that in a tank. The tanks were built to lull you into complacency. Nothing goes into the tank. You can't filter contaminated water that's poured. Water is radioactive fuel water. It's not water anymore. You can never filter that so it can be used for any application whatsoever. Not only that, if you put it in the tank, once it settles in the bottom of the tank, you have a chain reaction in the bottom of the tank because you're having fuel particulates. The tanks were built to trick you and manipulate you. You lost the entire inventories right away. And this is TEPCO's numbers. Don't tell John Laforge. He'll call the cops if you do. Large volumes, he'll call them on you because you're making trouble for pro-nuclear scum pretending they're anti-nuclear. Large volumes of radioactively contaminated cooling water into the Pacific. Rafael Grossi, the current head of the degenerate International Atomic Energy Agency, went there 2 days before that and picked up a $19.3 million check. Japan is the third biggest donor to the scum of the earth nuclear industry, Japan in particular. 2023, so he's invoking 2023, he's suggesting that this never happened. And he doesn't show you a single picture in any of these stories. I wonder why when these pictures all exist. When you read a story allegedly from some anti-nuclear group and they don't show you a single picture, you should be very, 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 very concerned. And we should all now work to find out who else is at Nukewatch and that he's manipulating, because he's not doing it on his own. The 2023 ban, they banned all the food in Japan. China did. It wasn't just 2023. Now, what happened in 2023 was they alleged they were releasing tritiated water into the ocean. Everything was safe, so shut up. They alleged there was 2 grams in 1,000 tanks, and that's what it was contaminated with, of tritium. 3H, by the way. Nothing be further from the truth. There's nothing in tanks. You can't filter water you're pouring over a nuclear meltdown because it has fuel particulates. You can't recover it. They have holes drilled around the site where they're bringing up water samples, and then they're going to do isotope counts on that. And that was what was supposed to be going into the tanks. That was the official original story. And then they came out and claimed in 2013 all the tanks were full from water they pumped up underneath the site itself. Like, they tell so many lies, but then they just whitewashed the board. The International Atomic Energy Agency in 2023 worked with Japan, worked with Taiwan, South Korea, and China to hoodwink the Asian community, which is around 6 billion people worldwide. So China played their part, and Taiwan played their part, and South Korea played their part. They're going to ban the fish off the coast. The food was banned already by 55 countries for a decade, including China and Taiwan. You're talking about an evil industry that has to be held accountable. It's never been held accountable, but it has to be held accountable. We're in over our heads now. We're going to lose the planet. And we're losing, it's not just the birds and the whales and the mammals and animals and bees and everything else that are going to be wiped out, are being wiped out. I got a two-headed gray whale. All the current gray whales, by the way, are severely emaciated. They were emaciated last year, and they won't be here by next year. They were emaciated last year. They're severely emaciated again this year on their migratory route north. Killer whales. This is Belgium. A severe emaciated killer whale. We have the same pictures now, last month or the month before, of New Zealand. Severe emaciation. You're talking about a whale that could eat over 340 species. So how could that end up emaciated? There's still species out there for them to eat. As they bioaccumulate so much radiation, they have cancer and leukemias. They produce more white blood cells than red blood cells. They're not able to uptake nutrition. All the birds are showing up emaciated. All the whales are emaciated. We've done 7 shows in the last week and a half of dead animals. Everything is emaciated. Living in denial is not a solution. The 2023 ban was imposed to comprehensively prevent the food safety risk. The nuclear doesn't want you to get sick by eating radioactive food. Oh, well, that changes everything. I might as well quit and give everything up now. The nuclear industry cures. They actually care for you, according to John Laforge. Prevent the food safety risk of radioactive contamination caused by the discharge of the nuclear wastewater. So nothing got out, is what John Laforge says, until John Laforge says it did. Nothing got out, Dana. The entire nuclear core injected into the environment and the fuel pools. With reactor cores, as soon as it hits the oxygen, it detonates, catches fire, and burns off the plutonium, uranium, and 1,000 other fission products. According to John Laforge, nothing got out of those buildings in 14 years. Nothing. I'm just another fearmonger. Now, John Laforge is pretending he's an anti-nuclear group. He's either co-opted a real anti-nuclear group, which is not unusual, or he created it. But he's 100% pro-nuclear. China's General Administration of Customs said then, shocked by Japan's action, Beijing's foreign ministry added that the discharge was extremely selfish and irresponsible. So this wasn't, in the first 20 days, this never happened, according to the China's General Administration of Customs is saying none of that happened. Just like John Laforge. John Laforge is out there to back him up. That's what John Laforge is doing right there. He's backing up a propaganda machine. That's what propaganda machines do. Neptunium-239 decays to plutonium in 2.5 days. There's 10 different decays, 50% each time. So in the first 2.5 days, 50% of it is plutonium, for goodness sakes. You had a plutonium plume cover your entire planet, and 14 years later, all the whales are dead or emaciated, all the birds are dead or emaciated, dead and emaciated. All the seals and sea lions and dolphins and porpoise and every species out there is showing up severe emaciation or just disappearing off the face of the earth. which would push the risk onto the whole world, says John Laforge. Like it never happened, John says, unless we stop the water discharge, and then the world could be safe again, and we can coexist with nuclear, Dana. It's hard to comprehend somebody like that even exists unless you're here regularly, then you realize there's an endless, a ridiculous amount of these people out there that will cut your throat for their little piece of the pie. There's nothing they won't do for their little pieces of pie. It's pretty heartbreaking, but it's normal. The majority of the journalists are the furthest thing from a journalist. Well, as far as I can tell, all of them now. Journalism doesn't exist anymore. Their job is to protect the nuclear industry first and destroy everything. If that's what it takes, if we have to kill every species on the planet to protect the nuclear industry, so be it. That's what they're doing. And that's, unfortunately, what they've always done. Why is every nuclear power plant surrounded by farms when the majority of the reactor cores are in the fuel pools with no containment, hemorrhaging radiation into your ecosystem? How can you sit silent on this planet and let them get away with this? How does that work? How does that work? You know, this is the long weekend here in Canada. The last holiday, I guess, before the bells start tolling again. You put your children back in the propaganda machines and finish them with brainwash them, send them off to university to turn on you when they get an education. I wasn't even going to do a show, but how can I not do a show? How do I justify that? I can't. We're being exterminated. You're being exterminated. The planet is being exterminated, every species. Like there's heart problems, liver problems, lung problems, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. There's endless diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. Everybody got an autoimmune triggered or injury right now. Everybody. Every species too. Japan has made sure. Japan is the nail in every species' coffin. Fukushima is the nail in humanity's coffin. The future of the planet is now compromised. We just want to get struck by a meteorite and get it over with. And pass on the pain to future generations of human beings. That's a really interesting word, human beings. If you look up where did that word come from, it was a king who didn't want certain people in his family to inherit the throne, so they were described as human beings, not persons. And then the courts and the systems started using that word for the same attributes. And pass on the pain to the future generations of human beings, the agency French press reported. John Laforge is truly one of the worst humans conceivable. Unfortunately, there's millions of them. There's millions and millions of John Laforges out there working for the nuclear industry. And on top of that, there's 1,000 public relation firms dedicated to protecting the nuclear industry. Very, very well funded. Have a huge budget every year. They're very motivated. And very rarely do they put their name on the story. John Laforge wants to be different, so we'll treat him as different. He's a different serial killer than the standard pro-nuclear serial killers, I guess. John Laforge says that never happened. That never happened. The entire nuclear core injected into the environment. No, John Laforge, nothing happened. There was a little bit of water got released there. It's only got tritium in it, so stop your whining. It's insane, right? Nukewatch has got nothing to do with... Nukewatch is about propaganda disguised as an anti-nuclear. Just another, like Arnie Gunnarsson and Helen Keller, Christopher Busby, just another pro-nuclear disguised as an anti-nuclear. Fukushima's 9 closest neighboring states, these are prefectures, they're stupid. Products from other regions, state, they're prefectures, stupid, not regions, will need health certificates. Radioactive substance detection qualification certificate. Radioactive substance detection, like Japan is going to tell you the truth. And production area certificate issued by the Japanese government for Chinese customs declaration. The lunatic machine says, relatedly, Hong Kong announced it will maintain a ban on Japanese seafood, sea salt, and seaweed imports. James put out 2 more songs, folks. One last night, one tonight. Really good songs. And Yellow Cake Mule, I've been listening to it, but I forgot to play it. Because I listened to it so much, I forgot to play it during the show. And he's got so many other songs that I just absolutely love. Now he's at a point I can't, fortunately, I can't keep up with it, right? And I don't want that music to go down some black holes and disappear either, right? So I'm trying to do some balance, but he's producing so much wonderful stuff. You don't want to change that rhythm. You want him to be able to keep doing that. I don't know how he's able to do it, but he's dedicated. And I would imagine he's enjoying it now because it's become part of your soul. When you create music, that's part of your soul. That's simply the way it is. It's definitely something to be proud of on top of that. Because music will stand the test of time, no matter what. So will I. In 1,000 years, the nuclear industry, when they hear the word Dana Durnford, will still curse and spit on the ground and say, scumbag. Knowing that I'm not no one can look at me and call me a scumbag, first off. I'm the furthest thing from a scumbag. I've dedicated my life to make the planet better, and I went after the biggest, meanest, nastiest, toughest, cringiest industry on the planet, the nuclear industry. So is James Lucid. Woke up one morning and he went to war. That's how I like to think of it anyway. It's a wonderful thing. So these are prefectures where the food was banned for 10 years by 55 countries. But see, on August 24, 2023, all of this disappeared, and they're only banning food because of the tritium in the water. Yeah, but what about the first 10 years when they banned food from 14 prefectures? And you should be, that's not necessarily true. They were just relabeling it and shipping to other prefectures or the other countries. They would ship it to like Britain, relabel it as from Britain, and then ship it to Canada, or ship it to your country or their country or that country. These are communities. The next row is population of the communities. And that row in particular, ignored it. This is United Nations in the first year, had done studies. And so the number there is just cesium-137 and no other isotopes. And there's a lot more isotopes. Curium isotopes is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods, not cesium. And cesium-137 is not a unimportant isotope. It's extremely important. It's pulses energy 600 feet every second. So imagine what it does in your body, right? If you can pulse energy 600 feet and kill your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells, what's it going to do with us in your body, or birds, or animals, or mammals, or insects? Or the biota. So, before Fukushima, 185, not 185,000 or 1,850, it's 185 counts per minute. And that's what they're talking about, counts per minute in this row here. Was an evacuation zone at the nuclear sites worldwide. United Nations now says everything is perfectly safe, despite the numbers are orders of magnitude above that. And they're only looking at gamma. They're refusing to look at any other gammas, and they won't look for neutrons, betas, and alphas, or X-rays. And then, why is United Nations your gods worldwide? That's the question you better start asking yourself. So these people, you can see the population in the second row over there. The first row of numbers to your left is the population of each of the communities. So just look at those numbers for a second. This is not all the communities, it's just some of the communities. All these communities have been abandoned. They're nuclear wastelands. But John Laforge says nothing got out. They got bans on the seafood, sea salt, seaweed. Yet the food was banned by 55 countries and 14 prefectures for a decade. There was no reason. There's 20 countries still banned it, by the way. Canada never banned it. Canada removed all restrictions after 93 days. And so now that everybody in Canada has been poisoned, they're bringing in the invaders to replace them because they don't understand what has happened to them. You can't get a doctor anymore because everybody's sick, right? And all doctors are just maxed out. They can't even conceive 2 minutes for another patient. It just can't happen. They're overwhelmed. Oh, sorry, I could have turned the microphone down. Very high concentrations of hot particles, including plutonium and americium. Plutonium and americium. And neptunium, which decays to plutonium in 2.5 days. There's 10 decays, so every 2.5 days. So 2.5 days after Fukushima, that plume is based on 20 days. It's only based on a fraction of the emissions that actually happened, like 1% of the emissions that actually happened. And radiation is the only plume that covers the entire planet. So neptunium decays to plutonium. Very high concentrations of plutonium, americium, neptunium, and cesium. Cesium numbers are just unbelievable. These are unbelievable numbers, by the way. These numbers are 1 million to 10 million times per cubic meter of air of pre-Fukushima numbers of radioactive fallout. And you can't have cesium. This is the French government, by the way. That's the model in 23 days. This model was 8 days. That's 23 days. That's the same model, right? It was just a screen capture that they were using. I think it was the video. I just happened to screen capture that back in 2014. But that was a cesium, so that's not just can't be just cesium. If that was just cesium, there's justification never to leave your home again because of so much radiation. Right? Theoretically, you can justify never leaving your home again. It'll pulse right through your house, right through your neighbor's house, and then through your house and destroy your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells, etc., every second for 300 years. Tell me that's not a horrible event. And tell me that all the biota and species in your meadows and forests and ecosystem are like Spider-Man and the Hulk. Because you're not. From the same 10 prefectures still targeted by mainland China. Mainland China. Which was a story that we recently covered, those prefectures. And that includes Niigata, of all places, Nagano. Niigata is and Tokyo, which is 36 million people, metropolitan Tokyo. The food from that prefecture was banned by 55 countries. Yet 36 million people continue to live there today. Citing ongoing concerns about the risks associated with the discharges of the radioactive wastewater, John Laforge for Nukewatch, an anti-nuclear group, wants you to look over there, not right here where you're two watching this. They don't want you watching me. Tokyo Degenerate Holding Company, TEPCO, lost $5.8 billion between April and June this year, folks. But the homeless and the destitute, the people that have lost their homes, lost their businesses, lost their properties, you'll get nothing. TEPCO loses $5.8 billion in the stock exchange. Overrun with the cost of inventing, designing, building, and testing robotic machines. $5.8 billion. And do you know what that robotic machine looks like? Have you seen it with your own two eyes? Just bear with me, I'll bring it up for you. $5.8 billion. You can do some pretty fancy stuff, right? Here it is. Well, it wasn't $5.8 billion. It was, what was the total number they spent on that? I can't remember. 48 million or something dollars? A total, right? And here's what it does. It extends into the reactor with this idiotic, moronic, bizarre-looking contraption. And if that was actually in the machine, the person standing there wouldn't be able to stand there. He would die right away because it would be so radioactive. It would give off so much radiation. This is what they done. So they built this contraption. It's like a fishing rod. They didn't even describe it that way, by the way. It extends inside the reactor, and then they drop this you ever see those toys where you got to pick up like a stuffed teddy bear or something, right? And you put 25 cents in, you got like 30 seconds to drop down this grapple, grab something and bring it up, and bring it over and drop it into so you get access to it. That's what they built. And the idea was to get a sample. It took them like 4 years to build this, $48 million. And all they had to do was put duct tape on that, on the outside of it, and drop it down. You would have brought up all the samples they could ever use, right? But the idea wasn't to get a sample. The idea was to make you think that it was so dangerous, that it was so exotic, that they're only the best scientists and academics on the planet. There's probably not an engineer on the entire planet didn't blow up laughing when he seen it. But don't tell that to TEPCO because they couldn't care less. Rain caused 130 schools in South Korea to close. So that administration closed 130 schools. This administration says it never happened in South Korea. There's a total of 880 metric tons of corium ore melted and rubbleized. 880 metric tons. It's not down there. It's all over your planet. It was fuel that was particulated. It was also, it's a total of around 36 reactor cores. At the top of each of the building was probably 8 reactor cores in the 2 fuel pools. They don't have a repository anywhere on the planet, right? There are a total of over 36 reactor cores, not 4. TEPCO says it has $4.7 billion earmarked for future demolition work. They spent $48 billion, not million, but $48 billion picking up 30 million one-ton bags. Which is interesting because they spent $48 million. They like that number a lot, apparently, in Japan. That's the lucky number in Japan, is that 48? They spent $48 million building this contraption here. I can see that. Can you see that? We're talking about the nuclear industry, right? They can barely tie their own shoes every morning. John Laforge is just an insane scum. 2 out of 14 to 20 million tons of radioactive soil was buried on the Prime Minister's office grounds in safety parity. 2 of the 14 to 18 million tons. It wasn't 2, it was a 1-ton bag. But why did he put that there? Was that meant to make you so confused it hurt your head and you just walked away from the rest of his lies, I wonder? They didn't bury 2 million tons of radioactive salt at the Prime Minister's grounds. 2 out of 14 to 20 million tons. It's the strangest. I wonder what happens if you play that backwards. I'm just the devil. I'm just the devil. 2 out of 14 to 20. I still can't wrap my mind around it. It hurts my head, actually. Let's get off to. In a surreal display of political slapstick on July the 19th, the office of Japan's Prime Minister buried on his office grounds 2 cubic meters. It was just a cubic meter. scraped up during the Fukushima cleanup operation, with some 14 to 20 million cubic meters of topsoil and debris were collected. It's 30 million. The radioactive cesium, really, it's just radioactive cesium? Is that all we got is radioactive cesium? Nothing but radioactive cesium, Dana. I thought there was other isotopes besides radioactive cesium, like neptunium, that covered the entire planet. Like americium, that covered the entire planet. Like the plutonium, that covered the entire planet. Like the cesium, that covered the entire planet. It wasn't just cesium. Concentrations in the soil being buried is 6,400 atoms / becquerels per kilogram. And he says becquerels are cesium. So you just can't have cesium. For every cesium-137, there's 100 times more strontium-90, John. Wake up, John. The radioactive cesium. Becquerels are a standard measured unit of radioactivity. Becquerel is a physical atom that's pulsing energy. When it pulses the energy in every direction, almost at the speed of light, that's a becquerel. 6,400 becquerels is 6,400 atoms pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. You can't just have cesium-137. You can't just have gamma. His job is to regurgitate the nuclear industry's narrative, but dress it up and then pretend he's anti-nuclear. The 6,400 is below the legally permitted limit of 8,000 atoms a kilogram. 185 atoms / becquerels a kilogram per square meter, rather, and you got to multiply by 66.6 to get a square meter. You're talking about 500,000 atoms per square meter when there used to be 185 atoms, not 100, like the age of a turtle. 185 was an evacuation zone before. So he's so anti-nuclear. All he does is sell you the nuclear industry's narrative. I guess it took a while for that story to come in. He had to send it off to the IAEA, get them to sign off on it before he can print it up at Nukewatch. The radioactive cesium. What about all the plutonium and americium? There's shit for brains. What about the Xenon-133 at 450,000 times above detection levels in the United States? What about the 500 trillion atoms a kilogram of highly radioactive sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyball enhanced isotopes? 500 trillion a kilogram. What about that? That's not cesium. The radiation emitted by the soil, there's no longer a soil when it's this radioactive, by the way, originates from cesium-137. So again, he's making the assertions there's nothing on his cesium-137, and he's going through a lot of work to do that. He's putting in a hell of a lot of effort. The nuclear industry should hire him on full time. Oh, that's right, they already have. Pretty crazy, eh? But like people like that actually exist, and there's millions of these people that are doing this, which was released in large amounts by Fukushima melting and exploding reactors. Melting and exploding. How come it doesn't show you any pictures? Is it a crime to want to see a picture? Wouldn't it give us the story more credibility if it gave you pictures? Melting and exploding. I was melting and exploding at the Fukushima reactors when an old friend, John Laforge, said to me, melting, exploding. How come he doesn't show us any pictures when he's talking about that? Because the story doesn't add up anymore when he does that. I'm busted up. I'm working 3 hours a day on the tools, You gotta love having all those tools, eh? What a difference that stuff makes. You got all the equipment, all the tools. Whenever something's going wrong, you gotta make something work. You just gotta keep going at it, and you got all the tools. Eventually, like it's really something. That all the tools I got there, it still took me 3 hours, but it was. You were okay. Well, I got to do this. I got to grind that whole area off, and you got different options. And I got to weld this. You got different options. I got to cut that. You got different options, and so you're guaranteed to make it work. You just got to punch the time in. That's the way it works. It's a good thing. And I'll share it with you in the next couple of weeks what I'm up to. Not letting the cat out of the bag yet, though. Disgusting nuclear industries out there ready to pounce on me. So, how come John Laforge from Nukewatch, anti-nuclear John Laforge, who's the furthest thing from anti-nuclear by the looks of it, doesn't show you these pictures to back up his assertions? Why not do that? Is it a crime to show pictures now for John Laforge? And subsequently fell to the ground as radioactive fallout. Oh! Fell to the ground, Dana. This is perpetual radioactive fallout. Because there's so much release, it's still releasing it. It could take hundreds of years for just Fukushima to fall out of the sky. Would you rather have whales and birds and bees and insects and puppies than dirty nuclear power and perpetual radioactive fallout? How come John Laforge doesn't show us any pictures? I have to put the pictures in there because John Laforge won't do it. Nukewatch won't do it. That's fallout. When it lands on the ground, it's pulsing energy at the speed of light in every direction. And like cesium, 600 feet in every direction for 300 years. But there's another facet to the story that really is really important. It's really, 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 really important. That's a gamma. Cesium is a gamma. And you're going to have alphas, neutrons, betas. You're going to have plutonium, americium, plutonium, strontium, uranium, all kinds of different isotopes. You're going to have gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas. They're going to be pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. Almost at the speed of light. Which is brutal on the biota and microscopic animals. We can't perceive it, but they certainly can. And you're going to sterilize everything. At the same time, you got all these gammas, neutrons, betas, and alphas. And because cesium will pulse at 600 feet, it's going to encounter all kinds of gammas and neutrons and betas and alphas, rather. And so when they hit each other, they don't just like pass through each other. They're both going at the speed of light, and they clap each other and change direction. It's known as a Bremsenlung, which is a German word I probably just butchered. And we call it an X-ray. And so all the species in your meadows and your forests and your ecosystem, all the biota, every species out there is getting full body X-rays, including you, by the way. Full body X-rays for here on, for the rest of our lives, forever and ever and ever on planet Earth, because of the nuclear industry. And because of people like John Laforge, who decided it's best to cover up what's happening, and he's not the only one doing it, but he's he's the worst type of offender where he's pretending to be an anti-nuclear, but he's actually pro-nuclear. And where I've showed him all this documentation, he refuses to accept it. Like Arnie Gunnarsson and Helen Collercott and Christopher Busby. These are John Laforge. These are the people that are going to try. I don't like Dana. I don't like Durnford. Durnford's too sarcastic. He's blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go look for somebody else. And they'll be directed through YouTube's algorithms and through the nuclear industry's influences to John Laforge, Arnie Gunnarsson, Helen Collercott, Christopher Busby types. And there's an endless amount of them, right? Veritasium, which is one of the worst humans imaginable. This this lowlight from Australia, fallout, continues to contaminate vast areas of forest and farmland in the region. Really, you think the radiation only went locally, do you, John? He's sitting back watching the show, laughing his arse off as we're talking right now, probably. That's what these people are like, right? They look like people, but they don't have any of those attributes whatsoever. In fact, I bet you if you've done a DNA, they'll come back as something else. West Coast hit with 220 million atoms of just iodine-129. That's not going to go away for 15 million years before it decays a single time. It's got 10 different decays. This is going to saturate the thyroid glands of everybody. The plutonium will saturate the bones, and the strontium will saturate the bones. Americium will saturate the bones of every species. So every species, including human, are permanently producing radioactive hormones and radioactive stem cells. And so when you're talking about the developing species and the species that reproduce every year or multiple times a year, guess what's going to happen to them? They're going the way of the dodo bird, all of them. So it's not a very nice thing, right? The nuclear industry doesn't have a single redeeming quality, and they covered it all up. Thanks to people like John Laforge and the rest of them. Rain with 20 million particles of radioactive iodine-131 per liter. These are particles from the explosion, right? You can't have iodine-131 unless it pulses energy every second at the speed of light. But Simon Fraser University had co-opted this study and said it was equal to 10 becquerels a minute, 10 pulses of energy a minute. It can't be iodine-131 if it doesn't pulse every second. So it's 20 million pulses a second per liter of rainfall. That's crazy numbers. These are crazy numbers. Another study shows 1 million atoms per square meter of Xenon-133. Nuclear industry buried the truth. Berkeley said there was no plume, over and over and over. There was an unprecedented spike of the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs per cubic meter of air. These are super hot particles. And when you were using salt water, which made the nuclear fallout billions and trillions of times worse. Because the sulfur is liberated at these temperatures that they're spraying the salt water. And they knew this back in the 50s and 60s. So it's hard to imagine what they were only doing it to try to trick you, see? The sulfur creates these spherical balls, the structure, and it ingests uranium, plutonium, and everything else. And they're very mobile. They don't need jet streams to travel around the entire planet. They're very mobile, and they're very harmful. They're super hot particles. My throat is a little tickled there tonight. Let's keep going. Plutonium covered the planet. Americium, neptunium covered the planet. Cesium, xenon, strontium, americium. Just endless. I got a bit of a hack here tonight. My apologies. Yeah, if that don't die down, we might cut it short tonight, but let's keep going as it is right now. The millions of tons, it's 30 million, the numbers matter, okay? Just throwing it is millions of tons, but the numbers actually matter. So 30 million tons of radioactive fallout in storage are being tested. They're not calling it in storage is like say your car was hanging off a cliff and you went home and your partner asked you where the car was. You said, well, it's parked. And they wake up next morning and they look out, there's no vehicle out there. So they ask you again, where's your car? You said, well, it's parked. And then you take your phone and you show them a picture of the car parked, but it's on a cliff and it's all busted up and it's ready to fall off a cliff. It doesn't work, right? It doesn't add up. Well, you say, well, why didn't you tell me it was on a cliff, busted up? Well, it was. You asked me where it was. I told you it was parked. And being tested and sorted to identify. You can't test and sort. The criteria for the radioactive fallout in Japan, right? Just imagine how bad it is when it covered the whole planet in 20 days. The criteria was 100,000 atoms per kilogram. You can't sort that. You can't test that. John Laforge knows it. To identify material with cesium, they're not going to look for americium or plutonium or plutonium or anything else. What a low life, what a disgusting thing this person had done. But he does that all the time, so. But they're very well funded, people like John Laforge and Nukewatch and Arnie Gunnarsson and Helica. They're very well funded. Helen Caldicott has produced over 14 anti-nuclear books that have got nothing to do with anti-nuclear. Yeah, she's going to put in some useful tidbits, but then she's going to brainwash you with propaganda. And her books always does awesome, man, because she's the industry. Arnie Gunnarsson's married to a spokesperson for 20 years with the nuclear industry. And he's the guy telling you Fukushima Reactor 4 fuel pool is still intact, for goodness sakes, and Reactor 3. The millions of tons of collected soil, and that they got the fuel out of the pool of 1 billion that doesn't even exist, and that he made the racks for the fuel assemblies for those fuel pools. If you don't know they're gone, who would? The millions of tons of collected soil now in storage are being tested and sorted. Several million tons of it may be used to, get this, several million tons may then be used as farm soil. It's really interesting what you've done here, because you put in road building, railway embankments, asphalt, layers of other material to seal in radioactivity, or farm soil. So how does farm soil fit in that equation that he just described there? One of these things don't belong with the other, right? Why would he put that there? And he didn't put any, like, which is crazy, or this is insane, we got to stop that, or this is outrageous, or this is unacceptable, or don't buy food, or nothing. He slips that in asphalt, and this, and railways, and road building, blah, 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 blah. Oh, yeah, and farm soil. That's just the way it is now. Evil is only allowed to exist. Nobody else is allowed to exist. Get sick and die. Get sick and shut up and die. Don't complain about nuclear. Nuclear loves you to death, literally and figuratively. Technical complexity of locating, contacting, removing, and containerizing 880 tons of highly radioactive melted fuel still smoldering. So he's saying it's still in the bottom of the reactors that ejected the fuel pools and the reactors right into the buildings. Man, wow. It's taken us, we've been at this over an hour in the same story. You tell so many lies in a single story, you actually can't get through the story because you tell so many lies. At the bottom, there's some at the bottom, but most of it was ejected out of the building or went China syndrome. Like reactor 2, a lot of it went China syndrome. Clearly, the fuel pools, reactor cores, they burnt constantly for days, but they were already gone China syndrome. The emissions were coming up through the same hole and going out of the side of the building, right? Of the 3 devastated reactors, so you're saying reactor 4 is not devastated? You're saying reactor 4 and the fuel pools are intact, are you, John? God bless you, boy. I hope you live to be 1,000 years old. Nuclear industry does too. The entire nuclear core ejected into the environment. Like, how can you say that this building is not damaged? How can you say the inventories are still there? How does that even work? How can you say reactor 3 has that particular attribute? How can you say a reactor 3 still has fuel there? How does that work? I don't know. at the bottom of 880 tons. As if the fuel pools don't exist. Highly radioactive melted fuel. Melted fuel. This is not fuel anymore, man. In 14 years' time, engineers managed to design, build, test, rebuild a one-of-a-kind robot that removed less than 1 gram. Less than a gram. Less than a gram. That sounds familiar, don't it? Less than a gram. Where have I heard that before? Now, we covered those stories recently. Not as good as some people, though. There was one person there that covered the story a bit better than me. Let me see if I can find it. This was a song James Lucid wrote and put together. He done the videos and pictures called Less Than a Gram, and it's meant to articulate that comment that James Laforge just made. We're going to play that. I'm going to give my throat a second to calm down anyway, but I freaking love this song. Same as that song we started off with tonight. I forgot to play it because I listened to it so much. I forgot to show you guys. So we've hopefully rectified that tonight. I'll be right back after this short song. Beautiful song.
Right beside old Unit 3 sits a shell-marked waste you see. Tanks of resin stacked with care, holding what the pumps caught there. TEPCO field 2 plans to show. One says yes, the other no. Each awaits a coming call. Neither clears the path at all. Less than a gram, that's what they've got from Unit 2, and that was a lot. Fuel remains in buried rooms while they measure water plumes. Early 30s, so they say, when the work might get underway. Decommission down the line, mid-century's hopeful sign. 880 tons remain, none retrieved from 3's domain. They debate what space to claim, still the Buildington stays the same. Less than a gram, that's what they've got from Unit 2, a careful shot, not from 3, not from 4. Still they work around the door. Less than a gram, still asking for
Less than a gram. Just love that song. There we go. 3 years behind schedule. That November breakthrough was 3 years behind schedule. Let's go back to the other screen. Before starting the full-scale removal of the nuclear fuel at the number 3 reactor. How are you going to remove fuel from a building that ejected the reactor core and the fuel pools right out of the buildings? How does that work? Anybody know? Anybody want to explain that genius to me? Anybody? Any concept of how that works? How the hell does that even work? John Laforge is just a terrible person, man. Holy smokes. If TEPCO didn't already hire him, they should hire him now. At the same time, China's domestic reactors in 2022 reportedly released wastewater containing tritium, calling it wastewater. He's supposed to be an anti-nuclear, folks. Tritium is not tritium, it's 3H, by the way, and everything is tritiated, by the way. All the water on the planet is now tritiated because of the nuclear industry's 80 years of emissions from over 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. At levels up to 9 times higher than the annual discharge limit is set. So he's apologizing for Japan. Right? Condemning China. The ultimate scumbag of humanity. The ultimate degenerate from humanity, John Laforge. Is co-director of Nukewatch, a piece, and he's the furthest thing from a piece. He's the furthest thing from an environmental justice group. He's the furthest thing from it. He's not an editor of a newsletter. He's the editor of a propaganda machine that is very effective. It's surreal that people like that actually exist. It's just, and so I don't do it like that song, but it helped my throat too, right? Just to calm down for a minute. I don't know why it does that. I guess if you sit there and talk for a whole hour, you'll start coughing too, trust me. Japan once again urges Hong Kong, Macau, to lift a 10 prefecture seafood ban. So Laforge's story came out just in the perfect timing as this story was popular too, right? They're working together, folks. Tritium, they're going to use the word tritium too. By the way, it's supposed to be called tritium 3H, not tritium. Because it's organically bound, it's very nasty isotope with a 120-year lifespan. So once you got it in you, it's in you forever. 9 times higher than the annual discharge limit set by Japan's, right? Remember the tritium? So he's doing the same thing, right? Japan has once again urged Hong Kong to immediately lift restrictions on the aquatic imports from 10 prefectures, the aquatic imports. So the idea of that narrative over and over and over, so you think it just, there's been no danger for all these years, right? In the first year, there was 865,000 extra cancers. They stopped releasing the numbers after this went viral. 865,000 cancers. Extra cancers. So not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed. From 10 prefectures. The food was banned by 55 countries for a decade. In 14 prefectures, half the country, the big prefectures. So the food was banned by half the country. Or half the planet. Half the country by 55 countries worldwide. Half of Japan by 55. I'll get it right next time. Which has been in place for more than 2 years. Saying the ban lacks scientific evidence. So the ban was there for 2 years, but they banned the food from all those prefectures plus another 4 for a decade. So the idea is don't think about the food, don't think about the radioactive contamination, think about the seafood only, right? That's what they're up to. And of course they're talking about the ban was imposed in 2023 decision to release 1.34 million tons. So the idea is to reinforce the tank narrative. And we're just going to touch on that story because we brought it up so many times and I didn't bother going to do the extra legwork because I'm lazy. No, seriously, because I'm lazy. That's the only reason I didn't do it. La 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 la. Da 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 da. I'm just going to do the short version. And then again, there's... Just bear with me. Here we go. Let's talk about the tanks for a few minutes, because I think that's important. I put that out there tonight. So go back, 2014, TEPCO unable to bring contaminated water issues under control at Fukushima. The Advanced Liquid Processing Systems, ALPS, has yet to function. Really, in 2014, Dana? So they had no filtration system. Now, it wasn't just 2014. This was all the way up until 2015 before they allegedly had it. They never even tried to build the ALPS system until 2013. The Areva system was the exact same as the ALPS system. They abandoned the Areva system. For the last 3 years, the system was unused and kept out of operation, which 2014 August, right? In April, they acknowledged that the ALPS system hadn't worked either. He's having 100,000 atoms per cubic centimeter. It is extraordinary for them to use the cubic centimeter terminology after the first couple of years, but the first couple of years you've seen endless numbers like this, cubic centimeter. This was their way of downplaying the numbers, because most people see 100,000 becquerels and their brain kind of freezes and they don't care anymore. These are extraordinary numbers. They're only talking about gamma, by the way. I think there was only gamma. Oh, they were saying the sludge from the treated radioactive water. This is 2011. There is no treated radioactive water in 2011. Right, this is where they were allegedly using a series system, which of course can't work. All the isotopes are the same size. How are you going to separate them? Because the series system was supposed to take out cesium-137, their cover story, right? The cesium's real. It's a nasty isotope. It's definitely pervasive. But the biggest byproduct of radioactive fuel rod is the curium isotopes, which you need lead-shielding 20 times thicker for. TEPCO said the groundwater bypass operation not having effects at Fukushima from entering the crippled buildings or the plant itself. So they're going to build a wall on the backside of the site to stop water coming down the mountain and coming through the site. That didn't work. TEPCO failed to deliver on the promise to install a fence to restrict contamination from leaking into the Pacific. Like the word leaking, there really should be a crime. That should be considered a crime to suggest that nuclear can leak when it actually hemorrhages. Like it's a catastrophic event. Every time I see the word leaking, it's very offensive for me. You can't build a fence to stop radiation. Radiation is not like I don't even know what you could describe it. So, like, how would you put it? And then, like, to call it a leak at the same time is madness. Why would you build a fence for a leak? Let's put it that way. So if you had a leak, which, you know what a leak means, right? It's a very slow thing. Would you build a fence across the entire ocean to stop it? Does that sound sensible? No. Congratulations. Welcome to the nuclear industry. At the time, TEPCO asked the government not to announce that they had committed to reconstructing the fences, as the utility was concerned that $1 billion construction costs would increase its depth for its stocks. This is the alleged story. First off, they spent $48 billion picking up 1-ton bags, 30 million 1-ton bags. TEPCO did not undertake the work they promised to complete. TEPCO was nationalized. It was owned by the government at that time. It was the government. It wasn't TEPCO. TEPCO was on the stock market. They went bankrupt, so they were nationalized to protect the stockholders. TEPCO's ice wall operation not meeting expectations. Nothing they does there works, is it? Now today they found that the ice wall plans are not progressing at all. No. The emitted ice wall will not stop the groundwater. No shit, Batman. Why would you build an ice wall? You could build a real wall. Is that crazy? Is that stupid? Is that irrational? Yeah. Less than a gram. Okay, so this was an interesting one. This is where they flew over, the United States flew over it in the first couple of weeks or something, or the first week. Aerial radiation survey conducted 1,000 feet above the ground was 3,000 atoms per square meter of iodine-131, 20 kilometers away from the nuclear site. And so they say iodine has a half-life of only 8 days. What a scumbag to write something like that. Just a low life to write a story like that. As if iodine was the only isotope. High-priced Fukushima ice wall nears completion. So you built an ice wall when you could have just built a real wall. Because that's stupid, right? Why build a real wall? That's stupid, Danny. We got to be an ice wall. 260,000 people worked on creating the wall. 260,000 people. Do you know how many of them people spoke out about it? None. Not one. Isn't that a little bit odd? You know how many people was interviewed about that? Not one. Only some people from a public relation firm in Japan. A total of 260,000 people. And so if you took 260,000 and divides it into the number that they spent to build a wall, everybody made $1,100 if you didn't build a wall. And there was no management or administration or anything else. If they didn't spend a nickel of the money they allocated to build a wall, the people that worked on it, the homeless and destitute, again, none of this makes any sense. Really? Why would 260,000 people? Because that gives it prominence, right? Holy shit, it must be something important. They got 260,000 people. You're talking about the biggest construction site on the entire planet ever conceived, and we've never seen pictures of it, never heard nothing about it. Do you know of a site where 260,000 people worked on building a wall? A wall. They built it by drilling holes in the ground. So 260,000 people stood around with their hands in the pocket while somebody was drilling a hole in the ground. A total of 260,000 people worked on creating the wall, Dana. Did they just like stuff it with dead bodies? Is that what they're talking about? 260,000 dead people got stuffed in a hole that blocked the radiation? Is that what happened? That sounds more realistic, to tell you the truth. And they froze them. They put water in. They put all these people down there. They were alive. Then they filled it up with water. And then they flash froze it. And that was meant to stop the water, Dana. Oh, okay. That makes sense. Thank goodness for science. 260,000 people built a wall. Wow. I can't say I've ever heard tell of a wall like that before. Have you ever heard tell of a wall where 260,000 people worked? They never slept. None of them slept. They went there and they were wide awake the whole time, Dana. It was awe-inspiring. So if you put 5,000 people on a construction site, a lot of them are bust in and bust out. And what they do is when you come out of work every day, they'll give each person $5 to not fight on the bus, for instance, right? Or the parking lot. And a lot of times, right, the bus will have a pack of cards, and everybody will get a card. They take another pack of cards, somebody will drive the card, and whoever got the card will win. Everybody's $5 will go into a hat, and somebody can walk away with a few $100, right? 260,000 people. You got any idea how many pair of gloves we're talking about each week? Got any idea how many paper suits we're talking about? Let's do some math on that, because that's really a curious number for me. I like curious numbers. I'm a weirdo. I know. Dana, you're a weirdo. Move on already. Stop talking about it. 260,000 people. Let's think about this. 260,000. And they're going to work times 7. or they're working 7 days. It's a pretty important wall. You got 260,000 people. That's a pretty important wall. That's 1.8 million suits a week. Times, was it, say 16 months or something? I'm just being stupid. I'm just being ridiculous right now. I apologize. So, 260,000 people. So each one of them needs 6 feet times 6. Needs 6 feet room space. And so that's 1.56 million. Divide that by 5,000 per square mile. So if you line them up, everybody is an arm's length ahead of each other. You're talking about 312 miles of people. And so if they stand on each other's shoulders, they're going to be way past the space station. So theoretically, you can get rid of rockets, and we can just get, because if they can build a wall, they can stand on each other's shoulders, right? Just work with me here. So how far up is? Space shuttle or space station. How high up is space station? Bring it on home, baby. How high up? 250 miles above sea levels. So yeah, you can get on each other's shoulders, and you can just bring everything up to the space station, right? If you keep them there for a couple of months, because they don't need food, they're nuclear plant workers, so they're different. They're built different than you. They don't eat or drink water. How much water would they drink each day, Dana? I don't know. That's a crazy question. Why you ask me stuff like that? I like it. How many buses does it take to move 260,000 people? Let's try that. You're like, Dana, no, Dana, that's crazy. 260,000 people divided by, 45 people on the bus, 50 people on the bus. That's 5,200 buses. Each bus is 40 feet long. 5,500. Yeah, 5,200 buses. 40 feet long. Divide that by 5,000 to get how many miles bumper to bumper of buses. That's 41 miles of buses. How many pairs of gloves are going to use every day? How much water do they need every day? How many face masks do they need every day? How many paper suits do they need every day? How much rice balls do they need each day? Right, blah blah blah. Logistically, I'm having a hard time accepting what they're saying, that there's 260,000 people worked on a ice wall. La 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 la. You almost feel like going in the closet, shutting the light off, closing your eyes and saying, this is not happening, this is not happening, this is not happening. So 260,000 people worked on creating a wall, really. Which means if you didn't build a wall, you didn't pay anybody else only 260,000 people, they made $1,100 each. Is it 1,100, 1,140 or something, right? We've done the math over and over and over. I refuse to do it ever again. We've done it too many times. EU Energy Commissioner calls Fukushima an apocalypse. Don't tell the 260,000 people that, but France says Japan has lost control. They should leave the country. Well, if they're going to leave the country, how bad is it at the site, I wonder? The The Swiss embassy evacuated Tokyo Fair in Asian. But it's okay at the meltdown site itself, Dana. 100%, absolutely. It's the safest spot in all of Japan is the nuclear site itself, Dana. Oh, okay, that makes sense. This is what it looked like on the 15 when all the reactors had already... Don't show that to John Laforge. He'll call you a lawyer. Liar! Slander! Tokyo lost almost control of the events at Fukushima, but it's okay to be at Fukushima. It's safe. Safe and effective. How many nuclear scientists have you heard from at Fukushima? Oh, that's right, none. How many nuclear experts? Nuclear report warns of an apocalyptic scenario at Fukushima. This could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet. If you go watch my 7 die-off videos we've done in the last week and a half, you will definitely agree that this is considered the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet. So is John Laforge, but his parents were probably scumbag pro-nuclear too. Officials unsure what to do next. South Korea, and scumbag South Korea, government that is, calls Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetent. Now they're like, it was awesome. They're so wonderful. Here's a story that'll blow your mind, hopefully. Maybe. Depends. If you're John Laforge, you'll probably be yucking it up. But an elementary school in Koriyama City, a nuclear wasteland, where every building there, 300,000 people, every building there is entitled to be decontaminated. You can't decontaminate a building from radioactive fallout. That's why you don't want to live within 100 miles of it. You can't contain it either. You don't want to live within 100 miles of a nuclear power plant or nuclear dump because you can't contain the emissions. The fuel pools have no containment. So the reactor cores comes out, big chunks of it every 14 months or so, and goes to a fuel pool where it's splitting atoms for 1 million years. The fuel is, so putting it in a pool is not going to stop it. You're being poisoned. Elementary school in Koriyama City, this is how loving your teachers are. God bless teachers, boy. Which is located in Fukushima Prefecture, 34 miles of Medusa / Fukushima, is using water bottles to shield radiation coming from the courtyard and other areas around the school buildings. You heard me right. The bottles are filled with water and placed inside of square boxes and are stacked around the classroom. What makes it even crazier is they had the students bring the bottles. The students were told to bring empty bottles, and they even got aquariums. Look, somebody donated aquariums. And they fill it up with water, and that stops the gamma, the neutron bombardments, the X-rays, the alpha shines, the beta X-rays from going through the walls to the classrooms. But the problem is the school interior is brutally radioactive too. So you're like, well, they should move them editor, Dana. Look, exactly. That's exactly my thoughts. Thank you. Thank you. So this is great. Inside and outside the classroom, inside and outdoors, they have these bottle stacks, and they make a difference. The water bottles shield radiation coming from the courtyard and other areas around the school buildings. Within 600 feet, cesium will pulse right through the school. The bottles are filled with water and placed inside of square boxes that are stacked around the classrooms. That's brilliant. Don't get them edited. Don't evacuate them. Don't put them somewhere safe. Let's just fill up boxes with bottles of water. That'll fix it. According to the principal and the teachers, it seemed to have reduced the radiation levels inside by 1/3. But can't be sure because they only got safe cast Geiger counter. Those things are reliably unreliable. Yeah, world's insane. That's what I call it. You got it. I don't think the world realizes how insane this planet actually is. When it comes to nuclear, according to the school, it seems to have reduced the radiation levels inside by 1/3. Whew, that's cool. And send those little kids in there. They don't need to be protected from radiation. They're just developing. They'll be just fine. Residents of Koriyama City have been concerned about the high amount of radioactive materials which has been found around the town. Around the town, they're surrounded by millions of one-ton bags of radioactive fallout they picked up. Oh, well, honey, we can get a cheap house in Koriyama. Well, that's our budget. We better go there. Don't worry, the scientist says it's like a banana. Residents of a nuclear wasteland have concerns about the high amount of radioactive material. While school lunches are tested for radiation, really, in a nuclear wasteland? By who, I wonder? UN? Because Koriyama is outside the evacuation zone. The government has barely conducted any decontamination activities. Well, like the United Nations Scientific Committee, also known as Scumbag, Koriyama City is right. It's got 162,000 atoms per square meter of just cesium-137. Lucky them. 341,781 victims in a nuclear. That's an actual nuclear wasteland. 162,000 atoms per square meter has always been considered a brutal, uninhabitable nuclear wasteland. That's a nuclear. All of these communities are nuclear wastelands. All these people were sacrificed so the nuclear industry could pretend that it has a few redeeming qualities. That's just normal. It's the nuclear industry. That's what they do, Dana. Elementary school in Japan is using water bottles to shield the students from radiation. It's just another day in crazy nuclear planet Earth. Don't worry, be happy. Like, how do you rationalize this as a pro-nuclear, I wonder? How do you sacrifice all those children and feel good about yourself and your job? Like, they know the difference. That's what cracks me up. They're not naive. It's not like they're gullible or something, right? They're just evil. That's what they do. It's when it comes to evil, man, there's really not much. And it's not a crime to be evil. Well, it is a crime, but not if you're pro-nuclear. If you're pro-nuclear, you get a pass. Based on scientific evidence, Japan wants Hong Kong to take the radioactive food from the nuclear wasteland because he says there's no scientific evidence that there's any radiation. There's no scientific evidence. So that tells you how much control they got, right? But the story was about the tritium. See, this story is about, and they're playing their part, right? And Japan is like, well, it's okay. Hong Kong is like, no, you start putting water into the ocean in 2023, August the 24th, and they just keep regurgitating that over and over, so that becomes entrenched in people's, the most vulnerable. I mean, and what they had, and when this happened, and leading up to it, United Nations, with their Rafael Grossi went there a couple of days before the August the 24th date when they're going to start first releasing into the ocean for the very first time, right? That's the official story. Meanwhile, it's never stopped hemorrhaging in there. You can't contain it. It's always massive. You lost the entire inventories of 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools in just 5 days. This is a pulse event. This is a catastrophic planet killer. But it takes a few decades to play out. But we're well underway now. And so they got Taiwan, South Korea, China, Japan, and International Atomic Energy Agency working hand in hand to promote this type of story, right? Which is meant to pretend that didn't happen. There was no adverse effects. The only adverse effects was in 1,000 tanks. And I walked you through those tanks. Those tanks are completely fake, right? Chiba in Tokyo, man. Like, Chiba's right by Tokyo. It's not part of metropolitan Tokyo. It might as well be, but Tokyo's 36 million. The prohibited products includes all live, frozen, chilled, dry, otherwise preserved aquatic products, as well as sea salt and unprocessed or processed seaweeds. So this is social engineering. They're pretending Fukushima didn't melt down and it was only tritium released. That's what that's all about. In its website post, the consulate said that the Hong Kong import restrictions were not based on scientific evidence. There was no evidence that this happened, Dana. Okay, I heard you the first time. Scientific evidence. Scientific evidence. You got no scientific evidence? You scientific evidence lacquer, you lacquer of scientific evidence. According to the Japs, the Tokyo Electric Power Company discharged around 100,000 tons from the ELP treated water over the past 2 years, with no abnormalities in radioactive tritium levels, because that's, according to them, that's all that was there, and there wasn't much there to worry about. So suggesting this never happened is what they're doing. Not suggesting that they're vehemently, of course, these stories don't have any pictures, do they? Suggesting nothing got out of there for 12 years. Oh, and in Hong Kong, the Japanese restaurants in Hong Kong, especially the upmarket restaurants where the rich people go to, want that radioactive food from the nuclear wasteland for some reason. Japan crisis rattled even pro-nuclear France, the disgusting, despicable Christian Science Monitor. My goodness, these are goblins, eh? Japan crisis rattles even degenerate pro-nuclear France. And France is... Nuclear power is something of a sacred cow in France. But Japan nuclear crisis in the wake of last week's earthquake and tsunami. So this was the first week. And you see pictures of these, because of course back then cameras weren't still quite as advanced. March the 15th, 2011. So this is day 4. They're showing you these pictures. Despite French President Nicolas Sarkozy's statement that departing from reliance on nuclear energy is out of the question, the ongoing drama around Japan's reactors for the first time is causing some tremors in the nuclear industry, often described as a state religion. Yeah, the nuclear industry, very powerful in France. There's something like 260,000 employees. They all worked at Fukushima, I think, building the ice wall. That's the same people, maybe. No, what am I crazy? They're not going near Fukushima. Fears from Japan that even the safest reactors not protected from forces of nature are checking France's hope for a world nuclear renaissance as a form of clean energy. So 2011, Fukushima happens, they're still calling it clean energy. Angela Merkel today, Germany's leader, shut down 7 older reactors. Sarkozy, the disgusting parasite, French president at the time, is now also talking about the importance, and they got one looks just like him. It looks just like him, the current president. They went through 4 prime ministers last year. France is one of the strangest countries because it has president and prime ministers. So if there's a scandal, the prime minister resigns, not the president, right? So they had 4 scandals last year where the prime ministers resigned, but they kept the same president who ordered the prime minister to do the stuff that made him resign. You tell me that's not stupid. Sarkozy is now also talking about the importance of renewable energy. They threw that under the bus there a few years ago. No country in the world, let alone in Europe, is more pro-nuclear than France. They caused a civil war in Niger for 60 years so they can get their hands on cheap uranium, high-grade uranium. Yeah, it can't get much eviler than that. Every French person is said to live within 150 miles of a nuclear reactor. First off, every reactor in France is surrounded by farms. And so it's impossible to eat food in France without eating radioactive fallout. It's impossible. Now it's impossible worldwide, mind you. France, because of Fukushima pulse event and 1,000 fuel pools worldwide hemorrhaging radiation every second into your environment with no containment. France is so pro-nuclear that public discussions over the issue is constrained and that the anti-nuclear sentiment that does exist is a shadow of what it is in Germany, Italy, or Austria. Yeah, the anti-nuclear in France is pretty. They're a good example of what you should be like. Let me explain that to you. Actually, that's entertaining stuff. And the reason they're like it is because they've been excluded from society, right? Bear with me. Nothing works really fast around me. Not even me. Not even my brain. I got my own speed of everything, man. Where are you too, baby? Oh, crap. No, I mean like crap. I got so much crap. And it finally got to the point where I got too much. I gathered up so much information for so long. It's ridiculous. It's pretty impressive though, but it's a little hard to find stuff. Let me try another search. That one didn't work out. Well, it worked out, but it'll take too long. It never even give me nothing. We'll get it this time. All right, here we go. Just lucky, that's all. It's always been that way, though. This is the typical French protest, because the French have been excluded. When it comes to protests, they bring it, baby. You'll see.
The clashes were violent and widespread. Hundreds of police and anti-nuclear protesters chased each other through the fields and woodland near Vallon. Roadblocks were set up to try to prevent more protesters converging on the area, but at one point a group managed to block a section of the railway line. Fierce protests are expected along the 700-kilometre route to Germany. The train is the 12th and last shipment of German waste treated in France and then returned to Germany for storage. After Japan's Fukushima disaster, Germany is phasing out its use of nuclear power. Campaigners want France to follow suit, an idea firmly dismissed by President Sarkozy.
The French government, like every government, didn't learn the lesson of Fukushima. Nuclear is dangerous, it's dirty, it's rubbish, it's not renewable energy.
According to the pressure group Greenpeace, the shipment of 11 containers holds the same quantity of highly radioactive waste as the last one to leave the French reprocessing plant at La Hague for the German site of Gorleben. The train last November took 91 hours to arrive, a day longer than planned because of protests. Tim Friend, Al Jazeera.
I just got to watch that first part again. I never get enough of that.
The clashes were violent and widespread. Hundreds of police and anti-nuclear protesters chased each other through the fields and woodland near Vallon. Roadblocks were set up to try to prevent more protesters converging on the area, but at one point...
They bring it, eh? James put out a video of Atoms for Water. That's what we're going to play in a few moments here. We're basically going to call it, that's the show right there. You can't keep up with the nuclear. You just can't keep up with the nuclear. International Atomic Energy Agency originally rated it as a 4. What was the date on this? Day 5 or something, was it? Yeah, day 4. So by day 4, all the reactors had blown up. International Atomic Energy Agency rated it as a 4. Like golf, right? 4. I'm just going to leave that story because that's actually a really important story. It's just my throat is shot, eh? Let me just delete everything we've done tonight because there it goes down the black hole. The black hole of the nuclear. This is Isodope. She is a pro-nuclear. She actually married a billionaire, which is crazy when you think about it, because she's a degenerate lowlife, eh? She actually married a billionaire. It just doesn't even make sense to me. Since when did things have to make sense, you might ask? Well, it'd be nice if things make sense. And if you're a billionaire, you can do a lot better than that. She's the furthest thing from pretty. Get your radioactive peaches and rice. Look at these carbon-free sites. This is... How much stuff have I got on this computer? My goodness. Hang on. So James put out a really important video tonight about atoms for water. International Atomic Energy Agency. Newest scam now is atoms for water. Keeping the nuclear industry away from everything is the most important thing you'll ever do. That's where we left off. Okay. Would you rather have whales, birds, insects, and bees, and puppies than dirty nuclear power and perpetual radioactive folly? Would you? Huh? Would you? I would. I don't know about you, but I would. Anything but nuclear. That Yellow Cake Mule, man, that was such a wonderful song, eh? I'm sorry I didn't play that earlier for everybody. Actually, I just didn't want anybody else to hear it, only me. That's the reason. I was like, I should let other people hear it, I suppose. But I do that a lot. And so, scientific form. It cracks me up. So James got 2 more songs. There one last night, Uranium Freelance, really good. And Atoms for Water, this is a really important story. So we're going to play that video tonight. And we started off with this one here, Yellow Cake Mule. And Less Than a Gram was also played earlier. It was from the same site, James Luce's site on YouTube. Atoms for Water. I'll catch everybody tomorrow night, hopefully. I'm pretty busted up, so I'll probably recover by tomorrow. I'll get my act together. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. I'll see everybody. Tomorrow's the first day of September. My goodness. So, see you in September. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.
Done enough. Majini why? Water is life. Maji, Maji, water. Majini why? Water is life. Ay, ay, ay. Stop your fraud. Atoms cannot cleanse the sea. Unstable atoms consume the tide. Your desal is a curse, a disaster disguised as hate.